What if you could have it all, freedom, impact, and wealth, without looking anywhere outside of you, without trying to get some more information, knowledge? What if everything you need is right here, right inside of you? And that's the topic, pretty much, and more for today's episodes. And I have an amazing guest. You'll see who that is. But first, welcome on the new episode on my From Grind to Grace podcast, the show for the alternative entrepreneur, the entrepreneur who chooses to challenge the norm, flip the script, and choose freedom first. When freedom is not a destination, when freedom is the path. Because when you stop grinding for freedom, success just tags along for the ride. So let's make it the new standard in the industry, the norm for yourself, for your children, and for humanity. The big question is, how do you do it? Do it. And that's what I talk about on this podcast. And that's what I ask my guests. And today, I have the beautiful, the amazing, the warm cat too.
That's right, yeah.
Welcome on
Thank you.
my podcast. I can't wait to have this conversation with you when we connected. It felt so aligned
Yes,
and
yes.
straight away. And we'll talk about all sorts of things. And you heard about you heard the intro, and it's all about freedom. It's all about creating from freedom. And I know that the knowledge, the wisdom that you have contributes to this
Mm.
idea so much. And I would like to then maybe go back to that claim that everything you need to be successful, to create freedom, to create impact and wealth is inside of you. But first, I would like to ask you, how did you end up doing this work?
I have a very blessed journey. I think I made a good soul choice for this lifetime. So I was born into a family of Chinese healers, very, very close to my grandmother, she's almost a part of the old China, so to speak. She never cut her hair. She was fully immersed into Eastern therapy, medicated diet. So I was kept in the world of yin and yang. I was brought up in a world of duality. I kind of had a first step. I was introduced to it very young, and I've had the blessed joy of being able to live my whole life like that. Touching 50 next week. So it's been half a century of living this way. And I did what most young people do. I went and had my own life. I did music for a while when I was younger, as was the trend at the time. Grew up in the era of dance music, so I went and traveled, and then the healing was always there, and it was a true calling. It called me back. It didn't matter how far I went, how long I danced for, it called me back. And then I studied more and more. My journey to really where I am now, I went back to university, I studied Chinese medicine, I got really into quantum physics, and my dissertation was on the connection with quantum physics and Chinese medicine theoretics, ancient Chinese medicine theoretics. So that's kind of really brought me forward into where we are now and allowed me to combine those two things together. And so I started a community clinic for acupuncture, and I did acupuncture for years, but there was something missing. The people would keep coming back. I would treat them. They would come. They would say, "Oh, this is great," and then they'd keep coming back and keep coming back. And there was something in the exchange that didn't feel quite right. It was, there wasn't that empowerment piece with people. And so when I kind of had done the acupuncture for a while, and I think as people that work in this industry, we all have something within ourselves really that it's the ultimate wounded healer. We're all kind of searching to bind our own wounds. So for me there was something deeper within it, and I did the energy work, and then I came back to my original kind of gifts of being very psychic and did the training. And then along came the channeling and the work that
Mm.
I do now. Um, I don't think the world was quite ready for it. Well, I wasn't, sort of 20 plus years ago when I started with the Chinese medicine. It's been round circle, I think. It's that gift you had as a child that we've all, I think most of us kind of got to the point where we were taught either, it wasn't the way forward, or that we had to
Mhm.
kind of push it under the carpet, so to speak. And yeah, so full cycle, I'm back where I am now, in alignment, and here we are as of, I believe, Saturday in the golden age now, the new earth. So yeah, ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing actually was fascinating for me to hear that, about the combination of quantum physics and Chinese medicine,
Yeah. And
because
yeah,
like I think what's widely thought about Chinese medicine is kind of a like, is it even valid? You know?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's all, people have always been like that. I mean, I think people are coming round to it much more nowadays. And the difference with Chinese medicine is, it's beautifully simple, but in the first instance, more complicated than other systems to find, because we've got all the meridians, we've got all the different kinds of chi, we've got all the points in the body, and it's very difficult for the Western mind to comprehend because it
Hmm.
comes in from a completely different point. In Western medicine, they look to treat the symptoms.
Yeah.
In Chinese medicine or tradition and East Asian medicine really is a better descriptor for it. Then we look to treat the root and not the symptoms. So if you have a headache, in a Western system, you take a tablet, it makes the
Yeah.
headache go away. In that process of medicine, we look at what's caused the headache in the first place.
Hmm.
So it flips it on its head from people's understanding of what is disease, what is understand, the whole process of it. But I think, really that kind of delineates my journey, because when we look at the kind of where healthcare is in the West, it's very much, there's kind of ill, well, there's sort of not ill, ill, and then like, the end. Whereas in Chinese medicine, and what always fascinated me as a child about this process was, you kind of had, the end, the transition, then you had illness, then you had not ill, but then you've got this entire kind of another 70-75%, which takes you all the way from there to enlightenment. And it was always this scale of the kind of process of existence and life that really fascinated me. And even when I was at university, I remember, my lecturers were quite upset because they had to go and look at quantum physics themselves because it wasn't something that they really understood. This was 2007, I think, when I decided to get to that point. And well, maybe earlier than that, I think maybe 2005. Gosh, my memory fails me. But it was quite, 20 years ago, quantum physics wasn't spoken about as it is now. And so for me, there was a lot, I was looking at a lot of, the kind of theories of flow and kind of Moore's law and adaptability and those kind of processes that, everybody has this need to be happy and this process of enlightenment, and
Hmm.
looking at it from this aspect and how those facets of Chinese medicine would fit into that. And that still really runs through my work now because, although in a certain sense I've moved away in some terms to more kind of descriptors of quantum physics, and energy is a more modern concept because obviously the energy changes and flows. As much as many people want to go back to the old ways, is not how it's going to be. but it allows me to have this incredible foundation and
Yeah.
understanding of the universal dynamic laws of how creation is formed, how the physical universe is created, to be able to, grow my work and my theses and my ideas and adapt them from.
Yeah, and you know, my mind is instantly mapping what you are saying to what I do as well, including in terms of business strategies, marketing and sales strategies. And I'm just realizing, yeah, you know, looking at it from yet another angle, how in business and entrepreneurship, when something goes wrong, people instantly go for yet another strategy, yet another tactics, yet another method, as in deal with the symptoms, rather than understanding that what is working is really comes from somewhere, like from nature, from the universe, from what has been existing, you know. And like I actually even used to say it's not about what's working now, it's about what's working always, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's timeless, and that's when we look at this idea of grind, like what you're talking about, is there's I remember one of my old teachers talking to me about, when they said, the kind of art of war, which is a very famous Chinese, kind of text. And, when we look at business, he was laughing. He said, some people approach business, it's like being at war every day,
Yeah,
but he said the greatest war is won with the best strategy.
exactly.
It's not always won on the front line, and I think that's that approach sometimes, and yeah, there's so much in the ancient texts. I think, if we have the ability and the foresight to be able to intertwine everything, we can really begin to balance and create something formidable.
Yeah, I mean, I when I discovered that what I do and how it actually comes from what already exists, and instead of utilizing this temporary knowledge or information, utilize or experience, you know, when you know the way gurus say, even they managed to say, you know, 45 years or 55 years of combined experience, if there's two of them, you know, so they combined. And it kind of, I don't know. But how about thousands or millions of years of experience when you use what is working all the time, when you understand and it hasn't changed, right? That's the beauty. What's inside of us and what's out there, and the totality of it. It's been around for, I don't know, millions of years, right?
Ever. Yeah.
Forever, right?
Yeah, it is existence, so, and yeah, I mean, it's totally right, we have to, everything comes from the root, even when we look at nature, if you don't water the plant, if you don't feed it, if the root goes, the plant cannot survive, not that it's in my nature, but we can pick a flower and the plant will continue to grow,
Yeah.
so it's always about, looking at the root. And we are fortunate enough that, all the generations that came before us, they left that information, they left that knowledge. And as you say, it's timeless, the journey within and how we can create from within when it's not even really do the work, when we inquire, with an open mind and
Mm.
with wonder, one of the great losses of the modern world, this concept of just simply wondering what will happen rather than constantly trying to control. When we step back into that energy, it's effortless, yet we continue to believe the narrative, that if it doesn't feel like effort or work, then it's not worthy. And I
Mm.
think that's where a lot of issue is for people, is that they have to have this feeling of striving because they've been taught to equate that with progress.
Yeah, it's like if the approach is basically keep stuffing yourself with pills and just and keep going,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
ignore all other possibilities. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, wow, yeah, that's super cool. So I would like to go back to that moment when you transitioned into what you're doing now, because you said you saw what you were doing before was not enough. So what was that moment about? What did you realize? What did you see? And what changed as a result for you in terms also, what you start doing, but also how you felt about everything.
Well, I think for me, it was, I mean, I think I had so many expectations in life, in the sense that, when I went to university, I was under the impression I'd be going to like Hogwarts with Harry Potter, and it was just another like, sixth form college building, So I've always had this kind of romanticism, and I felt because of my grandma and the influence there, I always felt, especially with the acupuncture, that I was going into this great lineage, and it would be this incredible teaching of ancient knowledge, and it was just university. And again with the dissertation, everyone, oh, we've got to go and do this. Why can't you just study like elbow pain or something? I've always been out there in that sense. And so I think with the acupuncture, I knew what I wanted to give to people because I knew what I could see. There has always been within me a space that is untouchable, a fire that burns almost without heat, the eternal flame. There has
Mm,
always been that space where it's endless, it's infinite, it's
mm,
boundless. And I revel in being in that space. And that's what's allowed me to remain different, to see other things, to see through the veil, the falsity of everything, it's something that as a child I didn't understand that other people didn't see it. For years I was like, what are these people up to? And and so that's what I wanted to give to people, because that was my healing. That was what brought me to a place of peace, of awe, of magic. It was what refreshed my joy in life. It was this place that was my own, and it was somewhere that I could see and feel things that showed me what life was truly about, and I could operate on a different level.
mm,
There was, yeah, we have the kind of physical universe. We have to go out there. We have to go to the shop and buy milk and food to feed ourselves. We have to, wash our clothes. We do all of this, but it was that connection to that, and I could always see that undercurrent. Ever, as I said, since a child. And so I did the Chinese medicine, and it was great. But like people, they just weren't getting it. Not in a bad sense, but like, I'd say even simple things like, well, you need to go and help yourself and do this. And they'd come back like the next week, be the same, next week, and I'd say the same thing. And I was like, what is it that's stopping these people from helping themselves?
mm,
When did they give up responsibility? When did they give up choice? When did they give up their power? And that was the word that really stuck with me, was that people had literally, just, oh, hey, help me, help me, help me, and so it was that really changed in me, that switched in me, that knew that I wanted to bring that space and open that space up in people, because I knew they had it. I wanted to reconnect people
mm,
to that solace, to that serenity, to that understanding that there is so much more to life. That when we claim it, it's almost, we cannot contain it. There's so much in the experience of life. it's so extraordinary when we truly step back and take that breath, and even in experience, say, I have had this, this today is beautiful. The sun is out, it's gorgeous. We get to connect. We have this incredible thing with the internet. We wouldn't have had this. We have had this time together. We have had this experience. We've shared energy. And so many people are rushing so much through their life that they never stop to realize everything that they already have and everything that is already within them. And as much as I might try and study, I knew that there wasn't an acupuncture point to do that, you know?
Yeah.
It had to go beyond. And that's when I started studying, even within the ancient Chinese texts, the stuff that's still, I guess, classed as a bit weirder or cuckoo, where they talk about these ancient masters being able to do what would be classified as, magic nowadays. There has to be something in this. There has to be something in this. And so that's really when I understood that what I wanted to bring to the world.
Mm. You said something very profound and something that I resonate with so much from my experience, and actually how this very podcast came about as well.
Hmm.
When I finally reached the place where I felt my role, my contribution to the world, and who I am called to help, you know.
Mm.
So you said something, like realizing how you can help others was part of your own healing.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's such a huge part of my work as well in terms of marketing and selling, which
Mm.
I say needs to work as service, selling itself, selling as service to help people, to basically go on a mission rather than just seeing it as a marketing or selling. It's a mission. Your business is a mission. Your business needs to feel like a mission
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than just, oh, I need to make some sales. you know
Yes.
that's when you really step into your power, right? because
Exactly.
because business is your manifestation tool to the 3D world, right? So what are you bringing on the table? If you and I totally get it. So many people are lost and confused because they're
Mm.
conditioned, right? And they don't feel what they are bringing on the table, putting on the table, which is why selling is difficult, which
Yeah.
is why they look for, strategies and information on the outside, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And it's I think, when we, I guess it's like they call it like the penny drops, or we kind of get that moment, it's I think the mission gives permission, for us
That's
to
it.
shine in our light, to be, to go that step further, and it's something, I talk a lot about in my work is this idea, about moving from discipline to devotion, which is the feminine aspect of it. Discipline is like, I have to, this is what everyone else is doing. I need to do this. And I get up every day and I force myself to do it. And the more I force myself to do it and the harder I feel like I'm working out, I'm doing it, I'm doing it, I'm doing it.
And
You know,
repetition, repetition. You hear that repetition. Not enough. If you're not good, you are not doing enough reps. If you're not outperforming someone else, again, what can you expect?
exactly. And that's, discipline. With discipline, we can get it wrong. We can fail. When we are devoted to something, which is very much the feminine aspect of it, when we are devoted to something, it can't fail. Because we know deep within our hearts that we won't stop. So it's already successful before we've even started, just by simply devoting ourselves to something. It's a completely different energy. When we say, I'm doing this, not I'm trying to do this, or if I do, this 10,000 times, then I'll be doing it. When we understand that, when we devote ourselves, when we have that mission awakens within us, then it's already a success.
Yes.
There's I can't remember. There's one of the old stories, where they talk about this guy, and he says, "Oh, I'm going to build this house. I'm going to have this house," and blah blah blah. And they're all laughing at him because he's doing nothing. And it takes him 30 years. Took him 30 years to build this house. But eventually he had it, and all the other people who, kind of like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, they hadn't reached their dreams because they'd given up.
Massive
Oh, it didn't work.
action. They
Didn't
took
work,
massive
so I gave up.
action.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and people would originally, they kind of saw him as the fool because it's like, what's this idea? What's he going on about? How's he ever going to get there? But it was the energy of devotion because he never gave up, and it's when we devote ourselves to something, it's simply not an option to not get there, and when we have those callings and when we have those moments, it it kind of it even now, and I'm sure it's the same for you, it still sends that kind of shiver, like, right, I'm doing this now. But we know that whatever happens, that is coming through us, and we emit it like a frequency.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that is beautiful. And actually, I used to say, I said it once or twice, your mission gives you permission, and I can remember, I guess, to sell or something along those lines in terms of marketing. But that's true. And it's a permission. It's permission that you actually feel now. It's not logical permission. It's permission that actually pulls you in that direction automatically without you having to push anything or force anything or struggle.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
that kind
It's
of permission is the best.
Yeah, and once we have that permission, then we go, and it gives, the beauty of it, it gives us all the permission, to be brilliant. And it gives everyone else permission to be brilliant as well, and when
Yeah.
we understand and see and connect to our unique gift, suddenly it all drops away, the competition, the comparison, all of this stuff, because we
Fear of
understand,
rejection.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Our unique being is awake, is present within us, and when that happens, it's so much falls away, so much falls away. When I came out of, when I first trained for university, and a lot of healers, we kind of giggle because I talk to people about this, you kind of come out, I'm going to heal the world, I'm going to sort everyone out, you quite quickly realize that, that's not going to happen.
Mm.
um, and there's so many things that we're programmed to believe, when we're young and when we're trying to make our way in this world. And it's only really when we let go of all of that that the true brilliance shines through. And yeah, it's just so much more of a comfortable way of living. And I think now, in an energetic sense, the energies, the frequencies, everything's shifting and changing. This is the way of being and becoming.
And yes,
Mm.
this is the real way. And you said something else that's very important. It falls away. That resistance just
Yeah.
falls away. Whereas in most cases, for most entrepreneurs, and I guess grinding is a symptom of not actually dialing into yourself, right? And so I guess every entrepreneur is on the path of self-improvement. Unfortunately, a lot of that is that mainstream conventional self-improvement that is very surface level, and basically you do it through your logical mind, you do it
Yeah.
through your ego at the ego level
Mm.
rather than actually embodying you know, what we are
Yes.
talking about, the freedom, the wealth, the success, those things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head, and I think that's what's changing a lot, in the realm and the field of spiritual, entrepreneurship. I've been self-employed for like ever, and it gives that freedom, as you say, and it can be the most incredible journey to find out about who we really are, because it brings us into the world. We create something and we reveal it to everyone, like, here's what I've made, and it's our art form, isn't it? Our business, our everything that we present to the world, and we can use it as this incredible expression of self and being, but there are so many things in the very kind of business sense, as you say, where I meet people, and it's all about limiting belief, and they say, oh, I've got this one limiting belief, and they spend like 3 years working on that one, and then they've got this, and for me, it's about transcending all of that and saying, well, welcome to this space, where there are no limiting beliefs, when you can step back from it all and witness it, that not just the single belief, but the
Mm.
voice itself, and say, what's this? And create that space, that delineation. That's really that space that I'm in. I still, my mind still tries to speak to me, but we have a much better conversation now, and I can hear it, and I can giggle at it, and see it for what it is, and it's dug up so much for me in that process, because it's, when we get that, like, right, I'm doing this now, it's like, well, I've got to get out there and show myself to the world. I've got to do this, and so I think as entrepreneurship itself kind of grows as a thing. More and more people now are starting a business or a side hustle or whatever you want to call it. It's really allowing people to gain back that modicum of freedom from that very much the kind of employment model. And it's allowing people to see another way of being, and to create that freedom in their life, and to create something with their life. And it's fascinating to watch, and it's fascinating for me to see how things are really changing coming out of this limiting belief, system, because
Mm.
it was, very much people would do a little bit of training on stuff, and we can help you break through this, and we can help you break through this. But I found people came to work with me, and they'd almost become obsessed with the process of healing.
Mm.
And then they put the full stop on the business. Well, I can't do this. I can't move the business forward. I can't be successful in the business. They put
Mhm.
all these, ifs and buts in between. And, they were just consuming, consuming. I read this self-help book. I go on this course. I do that. I do this. I
Mm.
do this. I do this. I do this. And I remember laughing with one, and I said, "Where's your time for healing in the middle of all of this?" He was so busy reading about it, listening to it, doing this, doing that. There's no time for introspection. There's no time for integration. And when you have the gift, which I blessedly have, to be able to simply take people and shift their energy into this other place where
Mm.
everything is perfect, everything is exactly as it should be, where they can know in every moment that they are divinely guided, protected, and provided for. All the doubt, all the fear, all the worry just is gone, and all the limiting beliefs with it, because it's not a limiting belief, it's the fear, the doubt, the worry, the insecurity, you know the I am part of us that we're taught in so many senses is the greatest I am. There is something beyond that. Even beyond the isness, there is simply a space where we embody, and embodiment is beyond words, because we just operate in that manner. I don't think, oh, what will happen if that happens? I'm already doing it.
Yeah,
different way
and
of
so
being.
basically you are saying that perfection exists, right?
Of course, but we just
I
have a
know,
problem.
right? It's
You
so
know,
funny.
we have a problem with it. Everything is already perfect. We are
Yes.
already perfect. What
Yeah.
our idea of perfection, we're aiming for something else. You know, when we can do that and we see everything is already, then it's like, oh, right, but what am I picking fault with? And who's picking fault with it? Who taught me to pick fault with this? And that's where this space is. That's where we can meet. And as I know you've experienced as well, that's where we can finally come face to face and meet that version of ourselves and say, what am I doing? And we realize how much we've been chasing our own tail, our
Yeah.
whole lives, how much time, how much energy we've wasted, trying to keep up or fit into this belief of what perfection is, of what success looks like, of how an entrepreneur should be, of how a business has to be, of what the problem is. It's only when we can realize there is no problem that we can really truly create.
Hmm. Yeah, it's such a confrontational idea that perfection exists. You know, the way people say,
Yeah.
well, sure, it does not exist on the physical plane, right? And there is no need for it on the physical plane because guess what? Everything is already perfect.
Yeah, it
Otherwise,
is. Yeah, the physical plane is perfection. It's the ultimate balance of yin and yang. There's no gaps in reality. We don't look over there and there's a hole in reality.
right,
It's perfect. It's
right,
wherever we go, it follows us round. Our perception of it, that's our choice. But
that's
reality,
it.
the physical, the tussle between yin and yang is perfect.
Amazing.
The moon rises, that's the yin. The sun, the yarn comes in the morning, it brushes its hand over the flowers and the blossoms open. It's constantly in action.
Mm,
It never stops. And we're in the middle going, oh, why is it doing what I want to do? This
right?
little, the little tiny being. And you we can't control it in that sense. But when we connect to it, when we, surrender to it, and allow it and receive it and flow with it, then we can start to do really interesting things. Then we can really have fun with it. Then we can connect into those energies where, there's none of the lack, the
Yeah.
desperation. We're not interested in the symptoms. We know how to change things at the core and watch it blossom. We can take a seed, we can plant seeds in that point. And there's two ways of doing it. You can plant a seed and think, oh, this is this tiny little, seed that's in the ground and I need to nurture it and I need to look after it and I need to water it. And oh, is it okay? Is it okay? Or we can plant that in the ground and we can see it as a catalyst for growth.
Yeah.
We can see it as this powerful thing that holds all this abundant life that is ready to burst through the ground. And that's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, even through marketing, I saw, it's one thing to learn things like reels and stories and social media algorithm, and it's a completely different thing when you actually understand how the universe works, understanding the universal laws and using them the way they are, to communicate, to contribute, and to bring, create impact in the world. Two different stories,
Mm.
and you can, once that happens, that perception happens, you have so much power. And also, you are in control. Now you are not playing with the little tactics created by humans. Now you are playing and harnessing the universal laws, the nature. It's amazing how even in that, what you are talking about, is true. And So you mentioned transcending the things that are not serving us. So could you talk to me a little bit about what it looks like?
Yeah, it looks perfect. It's when we the transcending thing, it's a process of remembering. And I think that's the most important thing. Most people are still seeking, searching, and that still requires some sort of external activity. When it's internal, it's remembering, and that's all it is. It's everyone's truth. That's when I speak about that space within us, that ultimately divine space. It it is who we are. It's the blueprint of all the energies. It's what weaves all together, the great tapestry of life. And when we step back and just, even for a breath, even for a second, just think everything is exactly how it should be. We stop the fight. And quite literally, it is a fight. We're fighting. Oh, it should be like this. We're trying to change this. We're trying to make that. We try, and it's a very big thing in Buddhism, about trying to control what we can't control and only controlling what you can. And all you can control is inside.
Mhm.
But our experience and how we view things is our choice. And when we can remember who we are and know that everything is perfect, everything is exactly as it should be, everything is happening for us and not to us, then we can begin to see the truth within it. Then we can say, oh, well, why did that happen? And what did it mean to me? And how has it changed my journey? And what came from that? And what moved on from this? And we can begin to see the deeper lessons. We can begin to see underneath the perceived experience, the beliefs and the perception of what happened, and see the truth underneath it. And when we can begin to see that level, then we can operate from there, almost a more metaphysical process. Uh, there's so many different ways of seeing even the same experience. It's different for all of us. And so when we transcend into that space, it's just everything becomes clear.
Do you have a
We don't forget.
process
Hmm?
do you have a process for that?
It's a lot of remembrance and reminding
And
of
what is
self.
that? Let's say
And then,
so what exactly, you know, am I supposed to do to start remembering? What does it look like?
so the work that I do with people to get them to that point is I do divine channeling and what's called a very um, profoundly by an old client of mine, a sacred visionary. So my gift is to actually bring people into that space and reconnect them to those parts of those cells and waken it up within them to begin to clear everything away, to teach them how to see
Mm.
clearly. So I have the ability to go into people's conscious connections and peel away the layers and draw them back to those memories of truth. And so I see in visions they show me. I channel, so I can actually allow those parts of you to speak to you and tell you what you need to do, because it's different for everyone. We
Mhm.
can meditate, we can drop into those energies, and I sometimes do groups where I channel, and it's literally like someone pouring water over your head. The energy's just coming through, and everybody's a bit kind of kind of bleary eyed and at the end of it, and shifting and changing. But it's such a deep energy, and it's, for most people, it's right there, but it's untouchable. And it's about shifting and changing that visceral connection to it. And so when we awaken that and those energies begin to flow and shift and move, and even when I have the visions, it's so interesting because people are like, I could see like you were speaking, and then literally I could see everything. And sometimes they're ahead of me, and they're like, oh, I could, and then you said it. Um, it brings them back to that. It creates that deep connection to our truth. And it's as if all the conditioning begins to fall away. It's like the the layers of the onion, it's a well-used analogy. But we peel away the layers, we peel away the layers. Because for most people, it's really uncomfortable to operate from that level because we're so conditioned. There's a woman that I follow on Instagram who makes me giggle. She has a saying, there's a war on happy people.
Mm.
And when we connect to that and we're just like, oh, everything's brilliant all the time, but people, why are you so like this all the time? Why are you not bothered by anything? Why does everything seem so effortless to you? Why aren't you upset by this? Because I know it's insignificant. It's part of my journey, but it's not all or nothing. I'm not 100% panic attack, and I can sit back and allow things to play out and to happen and to see, because I know whatever happens in my life, I will know exactly what to do at the time. I will always make the right choice. I will
Yeah.
always make the right decision for me. And I am so solidly in that space now. Nothing bothers me, you
Yeah, and
know.
so actually quite a few questions are buzzing in my head right now. For the one is more of a comment, maybe, it's funny how many shifts are so tiny, and they are right here, just here, and and yet they are so out of reach.
Yeah,
And then when it happens, then oh, that was so simple, you know? So that can be actually frustrating for somebody who feels like I used to feel, okay, something is off. I know, I just don't know how to approach it. How is it gonna happen? When is it gonna happen? Can I actually stimulate that awakening somehow or not, or what else? So it can actually be quite frustrating when you have enough awareness, right?
exactly. And when people reach, when we're like, when is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? Da, da, da. In an energetic term, it's almost like the further we push it away
Yeah.
because we're not in the process of receiving. When we open, when we surrender, like, yeah, it will come in exactly the right divine moment. And I know it's coming, more than no, it is. I don't have to talk about it again. I don't have to do anything. I'm doing this now. That's happening. And, we then can concentrate on opening our energy and receiving it. And, the blinkers are off. We can see the full spectrum of all opportunities, everything that's happening. It has to happen like this, and it's gonna be like this, and it has to happen on Tuesday at 3 o'clock, and it's gonna
Mhm.
we kind of tunnel vision. And so many people build those walls around every experience, and they don't realize that by so desperately wanting it and stamping their feet, it won't come to them because they're not ready for it.
Yeah, and for me, when that was happening, I didn't even know. I could feel certain things were off, but I so didn't know how to approach anything, you know, getting to that space, that I couldn't even force anything because I didn't even know what exactly I would for. Like it was like I was waiting. I was waiting. Well, eventually it clicked. But the other question is, so, and it comes from my own experience as well. Sometimes you do get a shift and everything becomes light and bright and easy, and you're inspired, but then something happens, or it kind of wears off. It sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you mentioned that for you, you are always in the space where you are feeling inspired, you have the clarity, you know what to do, you know. So could it be that you still need to reach a certain level, like unpeel certain amount, figuratively, of layers to reach that place where that awakening is more stable?
Yeah, there are definitely ways of, that's where all the other, sometimes the other bits and bobs come in as well. So because I have all the Chinese medicine training, I'm like, yeah, well, we can move it on a physical level. We can move it on an emotional level.
Mhm.
But, the process sometimes with these things is it's like a glimpse of what could be, and it's our choice whether to remain in it. Sometimes, people, they're just not in that space yet. We think we are, but perhaps we're not. It's a glimpse of what could be. But we forget there's so much conditioning, there's so much programming, there's so much going on. And once we've reached a space, sometimes, it says, do you remember this? And much like ourselves, we forget, those old memories, ancient memories, some of these, goodness, they're thousands of years old. So we forget in ourselves, and we feel as though we're losing it, but we're not losing it. That space is always available to us. That's, a lot of the time, us kind of thinking, oh, well, I'm back to normal now, or this has happened. And feeling as though something's happened to us again and kind of closing that off rather than realizing perhaps this is part of the process. Because when we level up, when we change our frequency, when we change our reality, certain things cannot come with us. We talk, I always get, it's like this idea of going through gateways, people use a lot with energy. And it's almost like we've got that one suitcase that just, we can't get it through the door. And sometimes we're not ready to let go of that. So we choose to stay
Mhm.
with it.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine because also that's not wrong as well. That's our choice. We feel like, oh, I've lost this, No, 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 no. This is part of the teaching. Perhaps there's something in that suitcase that we still need to learn. Perhaps there's something that we want to spend some more time with, or we haven't quite finished using yet. We haven't
Yeah.
understood it. People say, "Oh, I felt like this, and then I'm back here again." But the thing is, if it's all
Yes.
perfect, what's wrong about being back here? What was wrong with here in the first place? Perhaps there's just something that we need to learn or we're not ready to let go of yet. And that's also not an issue. It's not a race. We're not here to
Mhm.
get past the line. They're like, do you want to try this? Yeah, I'll try that. There are many paths to the
Mm.
same destination. The way it was showed to me many moons ago was this idea that, we're all going up the mountain. Yeah. We said that we're trying to get to the top of the mountain. It's not a race, but you've got a choice. There's the nice footpath that's carved, that's nice and easy. There's the rock face. You can go up the cliff's edge. You could walk along the ridge. You can walk by the river. The path is your choice,
Mhm.
but the destination is always the same. So we might feel like, oh well, I don't want to take this path. I want to try that path. Because sometimes even, when we get these moments where we suddenly feel like we've had a shift up, perhaps that's us taking the shortcut up the cliff edge and we want to carry on the nice, gentle path. And our soul might not be ready for that. So it's about understanding sometimes we can see, see the top of the mountain, but might not quite be there yet. And so we
Yeah.
make our choice again.
Yeah, it's so important to remember that you want that luggage to fall off naturally rather than forcing it through the door, breaking the door, maybe the whole building, and then ending up in the worst place than where you started sometimes, right? So I'm wondering, do you see any patterns, like something in common, among most people or many people?
Yeah, hugely. Obviously, this idea that we're all striving for something, and that it's hard work. This human doing instead of human being. It's definitely, we're so connected to feeling things physically. I think people find it really difficult to connect to the deeper levels of where we're existing, because most people aren't in the present moment. They're either aiming for the future or they're stuck in the past and they're making all those decisions. They've either trying to get into the future and it's a lot of anxiety, or they're hanging on to the past and it's kind of more sort of depressive stuff and things like this. So there's definitely those patterns are massive, and especially when we're an entrepreneur, that's something that we can bring with us, and you know hang off the coat pegs of our office or our business, so to speak. I think the other thing as well is just this idea of perfection. It's a really important thing. One of the, even like law of abundance and the manifestation, I find that the bit people find most difficult is, right, I'm going to put this out to the universe and then I'm going to completely forget about it and carry on with my life. And that's the embodiment piece. That's the self-trust piece, because people come back to it and come back to it and come back to it. They don't know how to say, that's done and that's just happening. And that's that energy of devotion. Right, I'm devoting there's part of me that's happening now. And we just carry on as if it is, rather than thinking, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? It has to happen like this, and this process of failure, which is just a delineation of what our expectations are.
Mm.
Because, I want this, therefore, if I want this, then I've got to do this, and this has to happen, and this has to happen. And especially in business, boy, oh boy, is that there. I want to start a business, right? I need to get a web page, and I need to do this, and I need to do that, then I need to do this, then I need to do that. And when I get there, then this will happen. And all of a sudden, when it doesn't happen like that, people think it's not happening. And
Mm-hmm.
that's generations and generations of control, and a very masculine kind of form of that. Because even when we look at the kind of ancient Chinese, yang is the masculine energy, is very dominant. It's very much about control. Yin, which is the feminine energy, is about chaos. And when you talk to people about chaos, they think of chaos in the kind of modern terminology is like it's all over the place. But what they actually mean by chaos is divine nature, it's divine law. When you look at it in the sense of nature, if you make a garden, if you have a lovely lawn and the flowers, the beds all planted around the side, you leave that for a month, it's ruined. You have to be out there, you have to be weeding the beds, you have to be mowing the grass, and that's a very yang energy, about
Mm-hmm.
control, control, control. But when you look at some of the ancient forests in the world, to our eye, as the gardener, it looks like chaos. It looks like absolute, everything's growing everywhere. This is growing up that tree, that's good. They've been there for thousands of years, perfectly fine. All of
Yeah.
those animals live in there. Nature is abundant. Food is abundant if we know how to find it, and everything is thriving. And that's that energy. And when we can connect into that and build as nature builds and let go of the need to control, then that's when we can truly create
And we
something.
can't. And the truth is, we can. I just remembered about an article in some Lithuanian magazine about. It's mostly about. Um, it's called Key, about wisdom, nature, universe, consciousness, those kind of things. And that article was about the social networks that trees create, and that they don't in the parks. They don't, or way less of that when they are actually planted by humans.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, I wasn't wrong. That's why I didn't feel, as well in parks as I feel in the forest.
Yeah.
you know? So obviously that energy is not the same in the park because it doesn't
Mm.
have that same structure. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing, right? So
Yeah.
we
And
can perfect the layout of the park. So what? It
yeah,
doesn't have the soul, you know?
exactly. And that's that energy. That's that formidable force that runs through everything within existence, that is consciousness itself. Consciousness itself, has created all of these little beings,
Mm.
from the tiniest little ant to the blue whale, from the, a tiny little piece of moss to these huge redwood trees, all of this, so it can
Mm.
experience itself. And when we
Yeah.
can connect into the experience, the energy of the experience of what we're trying to build, and we can remember who we are, the experience we came to hold on to have in this lifetime, we can literally create anything, at the drop of a hat, so to speak, because it's a completely different energy. It's not forcing. And especially for women, because there are so many more women in entrepreneurship now. And fantastically, I think they're going to change business, and the way that things are done, which needs to change. There's that connection there. It's so much easier for women to connect from that space.
Mhm.
We don't have to tick all the boxes, cross all the
So
T's, dot all the I's.
for somebody who is in that place where they are exhausted, grinding, kind of lost and confused, and she's kind of feeling that there is something more, there is something deeper, but she's not sure how to access that. What one shift could she maybe try and do like today?
Okay. A really beautiful thing that I teach a lot of people I work with, and it's so simple, is in meditation. One of the things that we are taught in meditation is we close our eyes and we begin to meditate. We try and meditate. What I get people to do is just simply close their eyes and realize that the awareness, silence, that space is already there and that you're coming back to meet it. You don't need to try and do anything. That
Mm,
space is always there to meet you. And it's about in the simplest things, just simply take a conscious breath.
mm,
Just breathe. There's nothing more to do. And even something as simple as a breath, we don't think about it. It's just happening. You eat a banana, you don't think, oh, I'm going to turn this into a human being. It's just happening. The processes of life, the processes of existence and consciousness itself are always here, and they are infinite and they are abundant. And there's nothing you can do about that. Even if you
mm,
want to, you can't eat a banana and stop it turning into a human being. That is what's going to happen in your body. And that's pretty magic.
mm.
If I
I
said to
see.
you, showed you the banana and went, I'm going to turn this into a human being, you'd be like, wow. But we do that every day. And that, that subconscious energy, that is the yin, that is the feminine energy. And that's the part that we've been torn away from, for over hundreds of years, through generations as women. We've been disconnected from that part of ourselves. It's called woo woo, it's called, that is our most powerful asset, and it is your birthright, and it exists within you. So simply just close your eyes and just realize it comes to meet you. It comes to meet you, that space. The thoughts and everything that might feel like it's in between you and that, it's not you. All of these processes of consciousness are happening all the time, and it's within all of us. So, if you feel like you're burnt out, like you're desperate, you're all of this, simply just offer it out. Just close your eyes and say, take this from me.
Mm.
You know, gift it,
Yeah,
give
I
it
think,
away.
yeah, I think that one idea that it's out of your control anyway, realizing that is so huge.
It's all here. It's all divine. You're existing in this moment. Everything is working.
Yeah,
It's all
yeah.
going. Like we can't even explain
So it's
life
not
itself.
about making it work, it's about removing the obstacles.
Yeah. And the beliefs, there are so many things that we still don't understand. There's when we look at quantum physics, even there's some incredible pros. So we know now that, here's another beautiful aspect that, the universe, the entire universe as we know it, is recreated. It's, we see life as a film. I think Dolores Cannon was the one that used to talk about, we're in the movie. And when you look at quantum physics, they have this understanding now that everything is recreated as stills, but it's faster than the speed of light that it's recreated. So the reason that this hand looks like it's doing that is because the times and the frame rate that the entire universe is recreated is faster than the speed of light. So our human eye sees it as continuous movement. So if you think that that's happening, that literally, I don't even know what the time frame of that is off the top of my head, that our entire existence is being recreated for us to be able to meet the people we've met, for us to be able to do the things that we do, to have the food on our table, to breathe the air that we breathe, to see the beautiful sunsets and sunrises, to see nature, to see trees and flowers and awe-inspiring things, to have emotions, to have all of this, to have every, interaction within our life. And the force behind that is love. That's
Mhm.
consciousness. That's true. It's something is rebuilding everything for you at a speed that you can't even visibly see or fathom. Just for you to have this experience, just for you to be able to be here and understand more about yourself and grow and love yourself more.
Mhm.
No, this energy is not waiting, it's not impatient, it's not judgmental. you know there's nothing to do. It's simply recreating this for you. This hand is completely different to this hand. This hand is completely different to this hand. It's recreated. When we understand it's all an illusion at that level, it just falls away, because
Mm.
something is creating all of this for us all the time. And the truth is, it's you. That's the deepest truth. The divine aspect of all of us. It cannot love us anymore. It
Mhm.
cannot.
Beautiful. Amazing. Right. So, so I ask every guest at the end of the episode, every guest, three blitz questions, but quick ones,
Yeah.
you know. But before then, I ask, who do you help and where they can find you?
Okay. So I help women mainly. I help them, most women in business and just women to waken up their wilderness. Anyone who's got that seeking aspect, I guess, that hunger. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram under Catuniverse, the Catcher Universe. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me. I think I'm on Facebook as well. And I've got a little link, so if that's okay, I'll send that to you to maybe drop in the comments.
Yeah, definitely. I put all the links, as many as you want, in the show
Yay.
notes.
Yeah.
Super, amazing. So the three quick questions. So the first one is, when you hear from grind to grace, what goes through your head?
Where we're at in humanity at the moment. we're going from the masculine to the feminine energy. The grind is very much the old patriarchal system, and the grace is the new divine feminine rising.
Love it. I love this asking this question. It's kind of a like kind of, I don't know, might feel simple or something, I know, but the answers I get,
Mm,
the variations of all sorts of things and ideas, it's just beautiful. And all of them, absolutely all of them fit into what I was
mm,
imagining, picturing, when I was giving my podcast this name. It's kind of like, it's
perfect.
amazing. Okay, so the second question is, what change would you like to see in the world?
I'd like to see people flourish more and be comfortable within themselves. Yeah.
Yeah,
And show their brilliance.
yeah, yeah. I would love to see that. I think
Mm,
it's happening, unpacking slowly.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, and the third one is, what impact would you personally like to create in the world?
I'd like to, well, I am doing, but I'd like to teach people to nurture their nature, to waken up the wild within them, to reconnect to the divine chaos, and to create from effortless grace.
Amazing. Love it. Okay, so thank you so much for being with me.
My
Thanks for
pleasure.
the wisdom and the insight and the energy,
Thank
Kat.
you.
Yeah, it was so cool to have you here. And for the listener, yeah, let me know in the comments. What are your main takeaways? What are you thinking? Did it reach you in some way? Share. And also, if you know that somebody would benefit from what we just talked about, send this to them. No hesitation. And thanks very much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you in a week.